Nick Westergaard here, producer and host of the Tippie Leads podcast from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business. We're hard at work on Season 2 of Tippie Leads and can't wait to share it with you later this spring. In the meantime, we wanted to share the story of a Tippie alum who passed away in 2023. As you'll learn, Doug Slotten led a remarkable life. This story appeared in the 2024 issue of Iowa Ledger, the annual publication for alumni and friends of Tippie's accounting department. An extended version first appeared in the Fort Dodge Messenger in 2023. It was reprinted with permission from the author with edits by Tori Brecht and Amanda May. I recorded an audio version that we thought we'd share with you here as well. Redefining Heroism, a tribute to the unbreakable spirit of Doug Slotten, by Paul Stevens. From the movie Forrest Gump. I don't know if we each have a destiny, or if we're all just floating around accidental-like on a breeze, but I think maybe it's both. Was it destiny or random chance that defined the remarkable life of Doug Slotten? Slotten's feather lifted him from his parents' farm home in Barnum, Iowa, to the University of Iowa, to the financial district of Chicago, to the battlefields of Vietnam, where he lost his eyesight and half of his right leg, to law school at Arizona State University, to a job with the federal government in Washington, D.C., and eventually to his burial at Arlington National Cemetery. Slotten died of prostate cancer in 2023 at his home in Chevy Chase, Maryland, surrounded by his family, his wife Ellen, twin daughters Chelsea and Kirsten, sisters Deanna and Nancy, and brother Lyle. He was 76. Weeks after his passing, the circle of life continued with the birth of Slotten's grandson and namesake Maxwell Douglas Pavlovic to daughter Kirsten and husband Alex. Kirsten said, "I think my dad would be super happy and proud. Max has his chin, and mine, and also his furrowed brow when he's thinking really hard or displeased about something." It was a December day in 1970 when 23-year-old Army Sergeant Douglas Slotten stepped on a landmine while on a reconnaissance patrol in South Vietnam, attached to the 101st Airborne Division. He was quickly evacuated to a hospital ship, but doctors were unable to save his sight and were forced to amputate the lower half of his right leg. Call it destiny or the random nature of life, this much is true. The injuries changed the course of Slotten's life and all the lives he touched for the next 53 years. Slotten, a recipient of the Purple Heart, set out with resolve and courage to a future far removed from the farm where he grew up. A future that took him as a blind amputee to law school in Arizona, an impactful 45-year career with the Federal Communications Commission in the nation's capital, and a marriage of 37 years. Heroes are buried at Arlington, and Slotten was a hero. But in a larger way than what happened to him in Vietnam. Said his sister, Deanna, "While many may see Douglas as a war hero, I see him as a life hero. What makes him so special is not what happened to him in war, but rather what he did after that and how he did it. He was not bitter, didn't feel sorry for himself. Instead, he set about figuring out how to continue with the dreams he had and then pursued them with tenacity and great success." The arrival of Veterans Day 2023 sparked this memory from daughter Chelsea. "He used to come to our school classrooms to talk on Veterans Day on what he did in the Vietnam War. One of the stories he would tell was being on a hospital ship after he was injured and an Army chaplain coming in to talk to him. The chaplain had a bit of a prepared speech on the meaning of life and such, and started in on the speech. My dad interrupted and said, 'You're wasting your time. A lot of people say that. You don't understand. I was lucky enough to be born in a free country. This was my price that I'm willing to pay so that my family can live in a free country.' I don't know if it ever occurred to him to feel bad or resentful. He didn't let it define his life or purpose." Slotten was born in Fort Dodge, Iowa on December 22, 1946, to Leo Russell Slotten and Evelyn Woods Slotten, who farmed. He was the oldest of 4 children. After graduating from Northwest Webster High School in 1965, Slotten attended the University of Iowa, where he earned a bachelor's degree in accounting in 1969. Friends say his propensity at poker and ironing shirts for fellow students helped finance his education. He remained a dedicated Hawkeye sports fan, especially basketball, for the rest of his life. His first job out of Iowa City was in Chicago with major accounting firm Ernst & Ernst, now known as EY, but his employment was interrupted by the draft. He attended Army basic training at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and then advanced infantry training. Slotten was promoted to Sergeant E5, and after assignments in Georgia and Kansas, got his orders for Vietnam. He shipped out on November 7, 1970. 5 weeks into Vietnam, on December 14, 1970, he was with a reconnaissance platoon assigned to the 101st Airborne Division that was landed by helicopter on a hilltop in hazardous territory north of Hue. As he recalled in a 1971 interview with the Des Moines Tribune, "We were checking the area. I went off to one side, looking for signs of the enemy. Our group had found one mine. I found the second. I stepped on it." Within an hour, he was flown in a military helicopter to the USS Sanctuary, a Navy hospital ship where he stayed 17 days. After spending New Year's Eve at the Da Nang airport, he was flown to Walter Reed Hospital in Washington. He was given home leave and returned to Iowa with crutches and a wheelchair. As Slotten told Lois Johnson of The Messenger in a November 5, 1971 interview, "It was a happy time and it was a hard time. It was harder for the folks than for me. I'd had a month to adjust. They hadn't. I had ideas about how to function. They had to learn." Slotten returned to Walter Reed, where he learned to read Braille, and then entered Hines Veterans Hospital in Chicago for intensive training in how to live as a blind person and how to walk with an artificial leg. He returned to the University of Iowa as a special student, took 3 courses, and remarkably completed the 4th and final section of the Certified Public Accountant test. Slotten next decided to pursue an earlier ambition of entering law school. He applied and was admitted to Arizona State University School of Law, becoming the school's first completely blind law student. With a Braille typewriter and several tape recorders while living alone in a student-filled apartment complex in Tempe, he graduated cum laude and in August 1975 joined the Federal Communications Commission as an attorney. He would live the rest of his life in the Washington, D.C. area. 3 years after joining the FCC, he was named Outstanding Handicapped Federal Employee of the Year. He commuted to work by bus and train for most of his career, before taking cabs and Ubers in his later years. He retired in 2021. Slotten's service to the FCC was noted by FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel following his death. Doug's contributions helped shape the telecommunications marketplace and set the stage for the broadband revolution, she said, adding that he was a kind, patient, and selfless teacher. He was always generous with his knowledge and his friendship. Doug also reminded all of us that life can hold great things, even in the face of challenges. He will continue to inspire us as long as we hold his memory close. Slotten's family was hugely important to him, said his wife, Ellen Wackernagel Slotten, and he doted on their twin daughters. How did they meet? Ellen responded, "Doug loved it when people asked us how we met. Doug, being Norwegian and a Slotten, he was not one to show emotion, but he would get this little wicked grin and say, 'A blind date?'" She was a school teacher in Chevy Chase, and the next morning he sent a dozen red roses to her classroom. Their first date was in February 1986, and they were married 8 months later. His daughter, Kirsten Slotten, is a senior vice president with Weber Shandwick, a public relations and marketing firm in San Francisco. She said, "He wasn't defined by what happened to him. He never let that impact how he approached life. He gave his best at everything he did, whether with the FCC or raising us. He was very committed to people." His daughter, Dr. Chelsea Slotten, is employed by Sage Publications, an academic publisher of books, journals, and digital library resources. She said, "He was the absolute best dad. He was there for every ballet recital, writing competition, graduation, help with homework, answering tax questions as we got older. He was there to bounce ideas off of for potential PhD work. He even read along some of my course books with me so we could discuss. If we needed something, he was there for it." One of his lifelong friends, whom he went through basic training with, Paul Onerheim, believes Slotten's death was attributable to his exposure to the defoliant Agent Orange while serving. He notes, "The risk of prostate cancer is almost doubled for those who served in Vietnam, including a 75% increase in high-risk, aggressive forms of the disease." Onerheim felt so strongly, he contacted the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund organization, VVMF, on behalf of his fallen friend. In June of 2024, Onerheim and Slotten's family had the privilege of seeing him inducted into the VVMF's In Memory Honor Roll program in a ceremony at the memorial in Washington, D.C. Onerheim said, "Doug lived a positive, productive life under circumstances others would say were difficult. Others in his situation would have given up 50 years ago. Not Doug. It was an honor to have been his friend. Doug was a leader, quietly serving others. Rest in peace, my dear friend. Your work is done." This story by Paul Stevens originally appeared in the Fort Dodge Messenger following Doug Slotten's passing in 2023. It was reprinted with permission in the Iowa Ledger with edits from Tori Brecht and Amanda May. To read more stories about Tippie College of Business programs and alumni, please visit tippie.uiowa.edu/magazines. Season 2 of Tippie Leads will be along later this spring. Be sure you're subscribed on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen. If you've enjoyed this special episode or last season of Tippie Leads, share it with a friend or coworker. If you're feeling generous, consider leaving us a rating or review to help others find the show. This is Nick Westergaard signing off. Thanks for listening, and go Hawks!